someone asked a question about rove. Aren't most of the Rabbanim against this? Most of the Rabbanim? So how does it work? Isn't what? I don't know. Yeah, first of all, I know how they count. It depends on, like we talked about last week, the true Scotsman's fallacy. Who's counting? Who's admitting people? A Beis Shammai trick once was prevent the Beis Hillel people from entering the Beis Medrash so that they could tilt the vote. Shkoyach. So you don't know who is being counted. But more than that, this rabbinic concept, which is based on a pasuk in the Torah that you're supposed to follow a rove in deciding halacha, when do you have a rove? When do you actually have to look for a rove and decide based on the rove? Well, not just the Sanhedrin. Well, basically what's called a deliberate body. And by deliberate, I don't mean bemazed. I mean a body that deliberates among itself. Okay? When you have a community rabbi, he has to make a decision regarding the Eruv, Shabbos and Kashrus in his town. That question is put to him. Now, these aren't light things. A lot of Kashrus questions are Yisurei Kares, and Shabbos questions are Yisurei Skila. So he can make those decisions by himself, or perhaps he has some advisors. If he's really humble, perhaps he has a group. He takes a counsel with a group of men, and he takes their advice. But he ultimately decides for his people. Rav Kehila decides for his people, and what gives him the authority to do that? They give him the authority. Fine. And you could say in another town, the Rav comes to a totally different conclusion. His psak is exact opposite, but that's his psak, and that's totally fine. He has local authority. A deliberate body is when you have a Beis Din or a Sanhedrin. Let's just say a Beis Din right now is convening to decide a case of mumnus. So you have three men on that panel, 2 beat 1. Maybe they'll be unanimous, three against nobody. Fine, they'll be fine. You could have a Sanhedrin. It's 25 against what? What's the 71 minus 25 in higher mathematics, like Rav Schechter says, comes out to 46, right? So 25 to 46 vote, and you follow the majority. That's when we're supposed to follow the majority. But if you do not have a deliberate body, people actually got together to discuss something and recognized each other's opinions, at least the ability to give an opinion, then rove is never counted, which is why you will never have, even though you could find this mentioned in, let's say, you could open up a Mishnah Berurah and he says, Rove Poskim. How did he count? That's a good question. You'll never have that in, let's say, the writings of Maimonides or the Vilna Gaon. The Vilna Gaon says, Rove Poskim say this. What does the Vilna Gaon say? Well, look in the Yerushalmi, look in the Bavli. The understanding of the Ran here in the Rashba of this Gemara is the one that is the Ikar. What came up recently? 2 weeks ago, I heard someone say, this fellow is going to be saying a bracha on his talis because Rabbi Bar-Hayim says that the bracha is said upon putting on the talis at night. He said, "Oh, good. Rabbi Bar-Hayim said that." I was thinking, isn't that the opinion of the Rush and the Vilna Gaon also? It's mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch that the Rush says to do that. That's his understanding of Gemara, and the Vilna Gaon says, yeah, because based on the Yerushalmi, the Rambam is following Rashi and Menachos, but the Rush follows basically an understanding like the Vilna Gaon says. There's a different understanding. Okay, that's maybe we'll talk about that one day. Did Rabbi Bar-Hayim actually discuss this issue with someone? It's a well-known psak of his. I was unaware of it until that point. Okay, fine. I didn't give a shir. We should have a shir about it. But the idea that one should say a bracha upon putting on a talis at night is not such a new thing. There is who to say it. So there's precedent. So the Vilna Gaon, when he describes the idea of, I think, hold on, we have a question there. Is there a question?
No, just to confirm that, yeah, Rabbi Bar-Hayim has been saying, has had that position and expressed that position for many years.
Okay. Have you heard his reasoning for that position?
It's based on his understanding of the Gemara, like everything else.
Okay, fine. So if you want to understand an argument, the Beis Yosef himself even mentions the argument for saying a blessing. The Torah says it also, by the way. If it's in the Rush, it's in the Torah. So they all mention it's not such a far out thing. My point was the Vilna Gaon is not going to tell you the majority say this, so you should say a bracha. He's saying that's the honest conclusion that one gets from studying the sources in the Talmud. Oh, Maimonides disagrees. He says it's a matter of actual time. If it's night, you don't say a bracha. If it's day, you do. It's a much simpler understanding. Rashi follows that understanding also. Fine, but they don't say the rove. They don't mention majorities, and that's why we're not going to have a majority of poskim or not a majority or a minority of poskim endorsing a particular position until there is a deliberate body that actually sits down, a fair deliberate body, and discusses this and comes to a psak. So you can't say the Rove has come to anything. However, there is a chief rabbinic council. The chief rabbinic council actually has discussed this issue. Remember, we saw they voted 10-2 against going to Har HaBayis, the chief rabbinic council, which is kind of interesting because isn't that also the Meraglim? That was a 10-2. The question put to them was, do we advocate Am Yisrael going into Eretz Yisrael? And the answer that they came to was, majority was no. But the minority was correct, actually. They had God's endorsement, because for certain things, I don't get it, aren't we supposed to follow majority? Why are the Meraglim wrong? Because they were explicitly told by God that that position is not tenable. They weren't asked to decide on this issue. God had already decreed and given them a commandment. So too, the Har HaBayis thing, there is no deliberate body that's fair that has done this. The Chief Rabbinic Council is a political body that's politically appointed, and there's tricks and all sorts of things going on, and everybody knows about that are inherently unfair. You know, it's not a representative body that's, you know, that should be like the Sanhedrin. So it's already biased. Not only that, they cannot come to a conclusion that is, I guess it's not negated, but it is eliminated by the halacha. The halacha says the Jews have to go to Har HaBayis. As a matter of fact, this is just my opinion now. If a chief rabbinate and its chief rabbis want to just maintain, no, don't do anything, even if the government were suddenly on board and saying, fine, go ahead, do what you have to do, follow what the chief rabbinate says, and chief rabbinate says, no, we're not going to touch this, then they have to resign, because their job not to say teku and we're not deciding, it's their job to come up with a policy so we can move ahead. That is what a Sanhedrin's job is. A Sanhedrin, or the ones who have the authority to decide something for Am Yisrael, cannot say teku. In Bavel, when questions were not being addressed, there was no way to decide things at the time, so they said teku. Teku means let it stand, by the way. It's not Rashi Tevos. It's just short for take home, let it stand. But now they actually have to decide something on a policy, public policy for Am Yisrael, and they have to do something about it. If they do not feel that they're ready to do it, so they should pick up and just go.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.